Greetings, AP Euro scholars, looking at our review sheet for Unit 3 on constitutional versus absolute monarchy. Looking at the review sheet from top to bottom for my class here. The Dutch Golden Age, this is the 1600s, and it's a period where the Dutch get their independence from Spain, and the Dutch independence is acknowledged in the Treaty of Westphalia of 1648, and the Dutch are taking advantage of their position on the Atlantic to expand trade. Eventually they take over the East Indies from the Portuguese, and in the 1600s the Dutch have the largest trading fleet in the world. And the Dutch are the most urbanized of Europeans, and the Dutch are engaging in all sorts of manufacturing. They're making glass, they're making small textiles, they're making military goods, they're making books, famous for their books, and with the money they're getting involved in banking. And Dutch Calvinism, the values of the Calvinists or the Dutch Reformed are supporting this prosperity of this urban middle class that's growing, because the Dutch Calvinists taught the equality of everyone before God, the importance of hard work and thrift and sobriety, and this, along with their advantageous geographic position, makes them prosper. And you should know that the Dutch do successfully rebel against the Spanish Habsburgs, who were Catholics, who controlled them. And the towns in the Netherlands are governed by sort of an aristocracy of merchants. So there isn't a king, there's a stadtholder who's given power in times of emergency. But the Dutch are largely, it's not a democracy, but it is, there's broad participation by the wealthy middle class in the towns. James I is the cousin of Elizabeth I, who dies without any children, goes to her Scottish cousin, who's a Stuart. So the Tudor dynasty is replaced by the Stuarts, and James I is an absolutist. He believes in divine right. He believes that kings should rule unimpeded by things such as a parliament. There's a famous phrase, no bishop, no king. This is a time of the marriage of church and state, and remember, under Henry VIII, the Church of England is headed by Henry, and this passes on later to James I, and he takes this seriously. If you are defiant against the bishops of the Church of England, you're defiant against him. And he's taking aim at Catholics, but he's especially taking aim at Puritans who believe the church is too Catholic-y. And case in point here, the bishops are the head of the local church, of the local bishoprics or dioceses, and the Puritans believed in a form of Presbyterian government. This would be the people in the pews pick the elders of the church, and those elders go to a presbytery, sometimes you might call it an assembly or a synod, and they would make decisions from the bottom up. So the episcopacy is an objection by the Puritans, and the Calvinist groups in opposition are the English Puritans and the Scottish Presbyterians, really basically the same group, theologically at least. And Charles I follows James I, and he is going to lead the country into civil war, cause a civil war. Why war? Because Charles has been ruling without parliament. He's shut it down several times. He has put a ship tax, which is only supposed to be collected at the ports deep into the interior of England to raise money, and this is unpopular among the parliament, among the aristocrats. He forces loans. He arrests people who oppose him. And famously, he forces the Book of Common Prayer. This is the prayer book of the Church of England on the Scots. And the Scots, under John Knox, have become Presbyterian, and they want nothing to do with this Church of England. So after a defeat by the Scots, in which he's going to owe some money to them, and because he has declared war on Spain and is embroiled in a war in Europe, Parliament is going to be called into session after 11 years of being shut down, and he needs money, and he is going to be given what's called the Grand Remonstrance. This is a list of complaints by Parliament against Charles I for his taxing without consent and throwing people in jail and forcing loans and raising taxes without consent. And eventually, Charles is going to raise an army to put down a rebellion in Ireland, but the fear is that this army is going to be used against the obstreperous, the unruly, the dissenting parliamentarians, and England's going to break out into a civil war between Parliament and the king. Parliament's army are called the Roundheads, the king's army are called the Cavaliers. The name of Parliament's army is the New Model Army. It's going to be organized according to merit, not by birthright. And the leader is going to be this Puritan Oliver Cromwell. Charles I will be captured, he will be tried, he will be convicted. He's going to be beheaded in an act of regicide, and England is going to fall under a Puritan dictatorship under Oliver Cromwell for approximately 6 years. After Cromwell dies, Parliament is fed up with Puritan strictness, and they're going to ask for the Stuarts back. They're going to ask for Charles II, and this is called the Restoration. And he doesn't have any children, goes to his brother, James II. At this point, things get dicey. James II is an open Catholic, and he's married a Catholic woman, and he has a son, and the fear is he's going to force Catholicism back on England. He's issued the Declaration of Indulgence, not to be confused with Martin Luther and the indulgences, but an indulgence is a permission to do something which you're not officially allowed to do. Under the Reformation, indulgences were kind of like an alternate penance, and under James II, remember the Test Act under Charles II says that government positions, you have to be a member of the Church of England, and the Declaration of Indulgence allows worship outside of the Church of England for small minority groups, read Catholics, which he is, but also to participate in government. So the fear is that James II is going to pull a Bloody Mary. So Parliament is going to basically relatively bloodlessly evict him in 1688. This is called the Glorious Revolution. Parliament becomes supreme over the king, throws him out. They go shopping for a new king, and they find him in William, who is William of Orange of the Netherlands, and he's married to James II's daughter, Mary. So there's this co-regency that is put in place by Parliament. You should know some of the parties here in Parliament. The Tories are the pro-king party. The Whigs are the pro-Parliament party. Tories are more the landed aristocrats, and the Whigs are this growing wealthy middle class in the cities. Louis XIV, in contrast, across the English Channel, there is a growing divine right monarchy in France, and the Edict of Fontainebleau is going to overturn the Edict of Nantes. And remember Henry IV, who is this new Bourbon king after the three Henrys die. He is going to give freedom to the Huguenots, but Louis XIV down the road is going to chase them out. You have to have one religion, one king over that religion, and about 250,000 Huguenots will flee. They'll be going to places like the Netherlands. They'll be going to places like Prussia and to England. The Huguenots are French Calvinists, and these Calvinists are Protestants who followed the ideas, the teachings of John Calvin, the French reformer. The significance of Versailles is this palace to display the nobility, the power, the glory of Louis XIV. But Versailles is also a place where he required the nobility to have residence. There's about 10,000 nobles living there. Versailles is massive. It's really a town with this palace as its centerpiece. And the plan here is the nobility, if they want position, if they want power, if they want patronage, if they want a job for their kid, their relatives, they've got to be in Versailles, and they've got to be sort of at the beck and call of the king. And it's basically proof that the king here is supreme over the many aristocrats of France who are sort of kowtowing to him. Jacques Bossuet's political theory is this theory of divine right. The king rules over all with unbrooked authority. Jean-Baptiste Colbert's economic theory is mercantilism. Remember from your APUSH, your American history, mercantilism says colonies exist to serve the mother country, that there should be centralized control and direction of the economy. And the French under Colbert are going to give subsidies for things like building canals and roads, for making military goods factories, making cannons and things like this, and to support through subsidies, through government investments, to support growing industry. And the French have colonies at this time in America. Think of Canada, think of Louisiana. There's colonies elsewhere in India. And the intendant system, these are the agents of the king in the provinces. These are his eyes and ears. These are his administrators in the provinces. And what they're doing is they're working to have administrative unification in these provinces, that there's going to be more and more the king's power is going to be felt and present in the far reaches of France. The Fronde and the Frondeurs. When Louis XIV is young, there is this uprising of nobles, which is suppressed, which is put down, unlike the nobles in England in the English Civil War. And the Wars of the Fronde are going to be failures for the nobility. Again, a big contrast. In France, the king is absolute, divine right and all that. In England, there's a civil war, the king is captured, his head is cut off. Parliament agrees to put in a restoration. 2 kings later, they chase out James II and go shopping for a new king and queen, and they bring them over, William and Mary. Baroque art, the purpose of Baroque art is to show the glory of the king, the glory of the church. It's in stark contrast with iconoclasm. The idea here of Baroque art is that the church shows the glory of God and it can draw people to worship. And see workbook page 26 here for some examples. Here you've got that Jean-Paul Rubens, The Elevation of the Cross, where it's drawing you into this painting. As you're looking at it, the people who are pulling up the cross are pulling it into your space, showing you the weight of the sins of the world on Christ as he's being raised. You've got the Bernini statue who's pivoting, who's biting his lip, who's about ready to fling that rock right into your space as the viewer. Another Bernini, The Ecstasy of St. Therese, or Teresa. And here's a woman in the throes of passion. Her heart has been pierced by this arrow with this coming from this angel, and she's falling in love with God. And this is this woman who is going to reform the Carmelite religious order. It's going to become the Discalced Carmelites. There's other ones that are maybe a little more playful, Las Meninas by Diego Velázquez. And again, it draws the viewer in. You've got these multiple vantage points. What's this painting about? Is it from the vantage point of a person looking into a room at these young girls? Is it the vantage point of the painter? Is it perhaps the king and the queen whose image you see in a mirror? Is it the infanta? Is it this infant princess? Is it sort of the dwarf maid that's on her side? Baroque art tends to have some motion to it. It has, it almost draws the viewer in, as well as very often being this art that glorifies religion. The colonnade at St. Peter's. You've got the colonnade, these pillars that are kind of reaching out. They're kind of rounded or embracing. And the idea here is you, as a Catholic worshiper, if you've made it to St. Peter's, you are being embraced by the arms of Mother Church. These are just some examples. There's lots and lots of Baroque art, of course. The pragmatic sanction is the passing onto the throne to the daughter of the Habsburg monarch, and this is Maria Theresa, and the pragmatic sanction is an agreement by other countries that they will agree to keep the Habsburg Empire as one piece for the purposes of balance of power. And Austria is going to lose to Prussia, the province of Silesia. Frederick is going to take advantage of Austrian weakness, is going to pick this province off. Part of this beginning of the demise of Austria and the rise of the Prussians. Why did Catholic France support Protestant Germans during the 30 Years' War? Well, why are Catholics in France, Catholic France, against Catholic Austria? Remember, there's this idea of balance of power. You know what? The Austrians are getting too big, too powerful, and the French are going to actively support German Lutherans, German Protestants, for the purpose of bringing Austria down to size. There's this idea of a politique as a politician who puts nationalism, who puts politics above religion, and this is what you're having in France. You should be aware that in 1529, and for our purposes 1683, there are 2 Muslim invasions deep into Europe. The Muslims, with the start of Islam, the Muslims, they violently take over Christian communities all across North Africa, all across the Middle East, and they've taken over Istanbul in 1453. They've taken over the Balkans, and they're moving up into Austria, and they're pushed back twice. But Islam is this religion of aggression in the 1600s. Poland's weaknesses. Why is Poland so weak in this time period, the 1600s? Well, every noble has what's called the liberum veto. This is an individual veto where the Sejm, S-E-J-M, the Polish parliament, one noble can veto basically any collective action, and this leaves Poland basically unable to take collective action against some very dominant predatory neighbors. And by the end of the 1600s here, Poland is sliced and diced, and part of it goes to Prussia, part of it goes to Austria, part of it goes to Russia until the end of World War I, where Poland is recreated at the Versailles Conference. Austria and the Ottoman empires are similar, namely in that they're multi-ethnic. There's like 11 official nationalities in Austria. You have all sorts of groups. You have Poles, you have German Austrians, you have Hungarians and Croatians, you have Slovenians, you have Bohemians, you've got all sorts of religions. You've got the Catholics, but you also have Orthodox, you have Jews. Similar, the Ottoman Empire has millions of Jews and Christians living within it. Prussia, how's it unique from other German states? Well, it's ascendant by building up a military. The Fredericks in succession here are going to be funneling money, building, one of the notes in your book says that this fourth largest of European states is 13th largest of states is going to build the fourth largest army. And the general directory is similar to the table of ranks in Russia. It's the mechanism by which a Junker or a noble, Junker looks like Junker, J-U-N-K-E-R, by which a Junker rises in social status in Prussia, and you do this by service to the state, and the greatest service is serving the army. So the upper class / nobility / military / state, sometimes Prussia is called by commentators an army in possession of a state. And the Junkers are militaristic, and the Hohenzollern dynasty is the dynasty of Prussia all the way through the end of World War I. The Romanovs are the rulers of Russia, and Peter the Great is famous for his 21-year war against Sweden. He's looking for a port on warm water on the sea, and he's eventually going to win, and he's going to build St. Petersburg from scratch in this marshy area on what's called the Gulf of Finland, which attaches to the Baltic Sea, which does not freeze over in the winter. And Peter is very ambitious. He wants to turn Russia westward. He wants to westernize his backward country. And some of the things he wants a navy. He knows that the Europeans are growing rich on overseas trade. And he also begins, he wants to modernize by having industry, which never happens, but he does encourage in what's called the European or the German quarter of Moscow. He encourages these craftsmen, these artisans to bring their skills, and he does some studying of these skills himself. The Great Northern War sees Sweden defeated, Charles XII by Peter the Great, for the purpose of building this port, this new city named after himself. No shortage of ego in Peter. The Streltsy are the Kremlin Palace Guard. There's a revolt which comes close to killing the Tsar when he's a young kid, and then later there's an uprising when he's off to war, and he comes back and he's ruthless. He crushes the Streltsy, part of his establishing his unchallenged authority in Russia. The Third Rome refers to the idea that after the fall of Rome and after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks, now the greatest Christian city, so say the Orthodox Russians, is Moscow, and Russia is a Christian country at this time. Peter the Great's goal for Russia, we went over this, the westernizing his country, making it a seafaring country, making it a trading country. He forces the nobles to get rid of their kaftans and to wear knickers and breeches. He forces them to shave. And the idea here is they're going to look and act European. They're going to look and act not Asian, but Western. In the Orthodox Church, Peter sees this as a force of stagnation. It's an obstacle to his westernization, and the Orthodox Church will be taken over by Peter And the Orthodox Church will be put under a procurator general, under a synod run by the state. They'll get their freedom back after Peter dies, but Peter is trying to tame the power of the Orthodox Church as a force for reaction and conservatism in Russia. The table of ranks is Peter's ranking system within his government, within the upper classes of Russia. You need to serve the state, and the more you serve, the greater rank you get. One last term here, not on the review sheet, but you should know the term boyars, B-O-Y-A-R-S. These are the nobility in Russia. So there's your drive-by review. Good luck, gang.